We're now at Poisier Memorial, a really large cemetery here, and we've come here because we're at the Spring Offensive at the start of 1918, 21st of March. The Germans had their final last thrust to try and win the war. The Americans had just entered it, so they knew it was time dependent, and it failed. But the Queen's Bays were in the worst possible place when that started and lost many men, and there are 20 of them who are named here on a panel, so we're going to go in a second and see it. Apologies. I said the traffic had gone. We're on a busy road here, as you can tell, and this is the Somme area. We're very much in the middle of the Somme, and we're going to hit some of that. We're going to later on tonight see where William was on the 1st of July 1916, the really poignant start of that Battle of the Somme. But this, even though it's the same area, it's actually spring 1918. So we'll walk in now and pay our respects to those men.
So you just want to read that out, Chris?
It says, hope you can see that, Poisier British Cemetery, in memory of the officers and men of the 5th and 4th Armies who fought on the Somme battlefields, 21st of March to the 7th of August 1918, and those of their dead who have no known graves. Sadly, the Queen's Bays, there are 20 of them named here, have no known grave, so that means their bodies were never found. We're just leaving Poisier Memorial and Cemetery, but just before we do, we thought it worth showing you there's a memorial to the fallen at the Somme, the 1916 fighting in the Somme, the horror that was. So many men, I think there are 77,000 men who were killed during that period, whose body was never found, and they have a memorial at It's a memorial at Seattle, which is closed at the moment. It's been, for 12 months now, it's been undergoing massive renovations, but it's right in the middle of the fierce fighting that happened in 1916 around the Somme, and you can just see it in the distance. At the top of the monument there, you can see the flags at it. Hopefully that you can zoom in and catch that a bit closer. So all these fields that we're looking at now, this was such an horrendous area, and it was on more one occasion, but we particularly remember the Somme fighting for July 1916, the 1st of July, is still the worst day in British military history. There were 56,000 casualties, of which 19,000 were killed on one day, on the 1st of July. Now the Zoom we're going to do later on today is where William was on the 1st of July. So it's quite a thing to see the memorial for those that were never found. Who were named on this panel, and just interesting to see here at the Queen's Bays. They were the 2nd Dragoon Guards, but on these panels we've got the 3rd Dragoon Guards just moving across. You can see the 3rd, continue the 4th, the 5th Dragoon, 6th, 7th Dragoon, the Royal Dragoons. We go any further, and then into the Royal Scots Greys. So there corner of this cemetery, and I just want to finish what we've done. Sadly we haven't got a grave for these 20 men, but again on behalf of William I want to leave something. And I know it's not very big, this thing, because I'm kind of one short for our visits, but actually this is probably the most special one I'm going to leave here, because this Fran gave me this last November on one of the school sessions we did, one of the remembrance services. For some reason I haven't got one, couldn't find one. So actually this is from Fran, and I think that's a brilliant thing then to leave her poppy with William's mates. So I'll put that. It is very windy here, but it's really sheltered under here. So we just came from Pozieres Memorial and Cemetery, and we referred to the Spring Offensive, and there were 20 Queen's Bays named on the panel there. We're really now at the heart of the fighting. It's the 25th of March 1918. The Spring Offensive has been 4 days in for the Germans with rapid movement. They took so much ground in incredible speed, and we know we're at Montauban. The Queen's Bays, they were on foot at this stage. William would have marched here, and there was really incredibly heavy fighting here on the 25th of March, and they've come from where I'm looking now in front of me, so the fields just behind. They'll have marched through, heading into the village, and the diary, the war diary, refers to really heavy fighting all day, heavy attack by artillery, machine gun fire, and they were in it, you know, literally the whole day until 10 o'clock at night. But the war diary reckons that they fought really well, and they inflicted an enormous amount of enemy losses, and at 10 o'clock orders were received to evacuate, and at midnight they left here. And I think I have a head count numbers here. Yeah, here we go. There were 6 killed here at Montauban and 25 wounded. So again, some tough fighting for them here, but for 24 hours, and then they moved out. That's ridiculous.
I wondered if it was. And then we've got a solitary poppy there.
Oh yeah. We've just stopped. We're in the car here. We've just stopped on the Rue Henri Potez, which is just about half a mile west of a place called Meault, and the fields that Jeff's filming now are where the Queen's Bays were in bivouacs. We're in 15th of July 1916 they got here, so this is 2 weeks into the fighting on the Somme. So, you know, all this area would have had extensive fighting, would have been really horrific. We know that the Queen's Bays were here in readiness on the 15th, and we're going to drive into the village now because that's what they did on the 15th, but actually then came back. They were told to pull back and stayed here for another 9 days, I think, something like that, in bivouacs, just waiting. So this area we're looking at would have been their major camp. So whilst 2 weeks into the horrors of the Somme, this is where William was, waiting to be called in at any point in time and not knowing the fact from that day they withdrew, that it was clear that the Somme battle was going badly wrong. And it's also clear that they marched into the village. The horses would have been left here, but we'll do that journey now. This road, which I said was the Rue Henri Portes, this is exactly, we've got to cross the River Ancre, and we've got a trench map from the time, so it is the only crossing. So this road we're about to take is a replica, so we'll do that and drive through the village.
This is the route people to take to march into the village. So is this the river here, Chris?
Just about to cross it, not quite yet.
Oh, that was it.
Yeah, just crossed it. You see it on the right now, Jeff.
It's more like a ditch, but it's quite a famous river at the time.
It's at the village now.
And what, you spent 9 days here?
Yeah, about that. Well, in the fields we just come from, but on this 15th of July they marched into the village proper. Again, just expecting to head anywhere. So we said it previously, he's probably a very nervous man here, because they know at any point in time on this day, on the 15th of July, they could be heading into a really significant skirmish. It didn't happen. This is for Fran. This is the map that the children from St Wilfrid's of Grappenhold gave you, Fran, of this motor. Well, this is where we are now. So, it was a really lovely gesture when they gave you that as a thank you. So nice to be filming from it. We'll have to share that next time you see them. You'll have to tell them that we've been here, seen it. Okay, folks. So this is a real quick one, having had a fairly lengthy one this morning, but we just thought a really important one, that because we're now doing the 1st of July 1916, where was William on the 1st of July 1916? For those who don't know, that was the first day of the Battle of the Somme, and it's still, to this day, it's the worst day in British military history. It's an absolute horror. There were 56, something like that, casualties, of which 19,000 were killed on one day. It was just absolutely terrifying. And it was something that was going to be, the whole fight, the whole battle was to help the French out who were being bled dry by the Germans at Verdun. And this was another front to try and take the Germans away from there. But it just made no progress at all. So where we are, we're on the high ground outside. Oh, Jeff, I'm going to get the pronunciation wrong again, but Breslau. Oh, you know, we've been on Google Languages, but we keep forgetting what they say. So B-R-E-S-L-E, Brele, something like that.
Just say it with confidence and we'll believe you.
True. So yeah, we've been through that little village, and the Queen's Bays were here in readiness. They came from another place that I can't pronounce. Currieu, thank you. Which was the headquarters. Actually, some of the senior people were housed there. It's not far away. They're heading for Albert, was a significant part of the Somme to capture. And here on this high ground, at 3:30 in the morning, William and the Queen's Bays came up here in readiness. So they'd have been petrified. They'd have known the battle was starting. The battle started at 3:30. So as they arrived, what you're looking at here would have had all the Queen's Bays. And they're a dismounted cavalry at this stage. They're going to go into fight. They're going to go in on foot. so they would have been infantry, as they often were. But it's just great to see. Yeah, I do think it's poignant. The 1st of July is a massive day in British history, and most people, when they talk about the wall, that day comes to mind more than most. So I think it's just great that we've done. He was here from 3:30 in the morning till 5 p.m. and at 5 p.m. it went so horribly wrong that they knew they were never going to be sent in reserve. So they immediately went back to their base headquarters and were there for some time after that. So he's not involved in the fighting of the Somme on that first day. I say he wasn't involved. He's here thinking he may well be, but fortunately that didn't happen for him. But yeah, this is quite a sight that he must have had. And when you look around, he'll have had the sights and sounds of what that battle must have been like. It's hard to imagine, I think, how it would have been. It's so peaceful now. It's such a lovely spot. But they would have been listening to everything, and the shelling for the 24 hours before they went over the top. There are hundreds of thousands of shells that are landing all the time. They'll have heard all of that. There's another little piece of history here where we're standing. In September 1915, Lord Kitchener came here to inspect the troops. So it's a reasonably prominent place. It is really tiny, like many of these places. But Kitchener came here to say hello to them all. Not William, not when he was here. But in fact, I think Kitchener had died by then. I think Kitchener died in 1915, sadly. So that's it. So it was a really quick one, this, but I thought really good one to share. I'll probably never stand here again, but we've got it filming it, so it's there for everyone to be able to see. I always like to talk about the youngsters, as Fran knows, on these sort of things. So maybe in years to come, other generations can look at this and be able to say, my great, whatever, this is the land that he was on the 1st of July. So that's it for our day. We've got one more place to do, which is we're bobbing between the Somme fighting and the spring offensive 2 years later. And it's a sign of how close the fighting was and how the ground here that was made in 1916 through to Christmas, the spring offensive, the German attack of March 1918, all this ground was taken again rapidly. It must have been horrible for the soldiers to see how many lives were lost to gain this ground, and then suddenly it's all given up again 2 years later. And we know that didn't last long. The Germans were on their last attacks and didn't have the resources to carry on. But then we keep bumping into it. We're only 5 miles away from where William was in 1918, and he's here in 1916. And say very short distances. He'll have recognised in 1918. He'll have recognised place names and thought, "I was here 2 years ago or near it." So these are really different parts of his war. Right, so I think that's it. We're one to go, and we'll send a video clip of that as we have been doing, and then that's it for the night. We're at Amiens tonight, and the story we'll start with tomorrow is around the battle for Amiens, which is why we're staying in Amiens. So that will be for tomorrow.
Yeah, and a few beers later.
Are we having some beers?
Yeah.
There's a possibility.
Just think, if William had fought that day in the Somme and had been killed, we wouldn't be here now.
Absolutely right.
No.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah. And actually, that day on the Somme, and also some of the other battles that we talked about this morning at Fonpou, and ones we'll cover tomorrow, you're right. It's just, I'm sure he would have said it at the end of the war that he was just lucky. Because even his comrades, I read somewhere that half of the Queen's Bays over the 4 years of the First World War, half of them were casualties of some description, wounded, some of them minor, and obviously some of them killed. So you have a 50-50 chance of having something significant. So yeah, sure he'd have said he was lucky. And I'm glad for all your sakes that you're here and he did survive.
Thank you.
So
right.
So
thank you, Chris.
You're welcome.
thanks, Chris and Jeff.
You're most
Thank
welcome.
you.
See you all again tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay, bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Morning. See you later.
We're on our last visit of the day. It's 6:15. It's been a really long day, but it actually hasn't felt like it. I think it's been really inspiring. We've loved it. We've been loved sharing it with you. So the last spot we're doing for today is a place called Le Hamel, a place I can pronounce. And it was the 30th of March 1918 that William was here with Queen's Bays. So we're back into the spring offensive. It's 9 days after the Germans started their surge, and this is about as far as they got. But the day William and the Queen's Bays will have marched here, we know they were in the village centre. We also know that this place was blasted to bits, so what we're looking at now, there was nothing left. It's completely rebuilt. But they had a really bad day on the 30th of March. There was a heavy barrage. The enemy attacked in thick waves throughout the day, and it sounds like they were repulsed, but it caused heavy losses in the German army. So there is fierce fighting here, and we saw those 20 names at Poitiers Memorial. Well, some of those men would have been Queen's Base who died here. It's a pretty little spot, and you can see all the flags. I think it's quite poignant seeing the Ukrainian flag alongside the flags of the troops who were here. It was 4th of April when the Germans captured it, but on the 4th of July, ironically, it was captured in a really significant and inspiring, it sounds like, its attack by the Allies, of which the Americans took their first part, 4th of July 1918. It also had, you've seen the Australian flags, there were many Australians fought here, and William did, tomorrow we'll see some of that, through his fighting the Spring Offensive, fought alongside the Australians, so he will have been close to them, so I'm not surprised that they were here as well. So this is it, so it's the end of our day. It's another brilliant place to take in. I just look forward to going through it all again with you tomorrow. Well, good morning everyone. On a sunny but cool morning, but the second day, the final day of our tribute and our journey following the footsteps of William. I thought yesterday was amazing, and I think today's going to be the same. And it looks like we're standing nowhere of great significance, but once again it is. We're on the main road from Mannion, and we know the Queen's Base came down this road, so you are going to hear traffic, I'm afraid. But this is the 8th of August 1918. It's the Battle of Amiens. It's part of the 100 Days Offensive, so the last 100 days of the war, and it's a very significant day, the 8th of August, when William's here, and actually on the spot I'm standing, which I'll cover in a second, because the 8th of August was described by Ludendorff as the Black Day of the German Army. It was the start of when it all went wrong, and from the last 100 days, pretty much everything was heading in the one direction of pushing the Germans out, and the war was over on the 11th of November. So when William got here, heading for the fighting that further up the road from here, which we'll cover on the next film, he crossed the bridge here, newest bridge now, but this was the exact location of where the Queen's Base will have crossed. And this was such a big part of the fighting. Amiens was the gateway to Paris, so protecting it was so significant. And actually, Villers-Bretonneux is the place we're at, is revered by the Australians. In fact, tomorrow is Anzac Day, so there's a massive service going on here. The Australians performed the road, but lost many here, lost thousands here, but did gain it on the earlier in the fighting. But it was here was the Villers-Bretonneux. It was a really important railway junction, and some of these places we say, why fighting at Cambrai, why fighting at St Quentin, wherever, why fighting here at Villers-Bretonneux the way they did? Railways. They were so significant to move supplies, and it was really important that they got hold of these strategic places. So this is just him. It's 4:20 in the morning, by the way, when William's coming over on his horse this time. He's not marching, the cavalry were coming over, and we'll pick up exactly where they headed, because he's not far away from the villages that they were fighting at. We're now at a point just further east from Villas Bretonneux. So we've come off the main road, which I'm pointing to right in front of me. We're pretty sure this was William dismounted. We think, looking at the diary, they're marching here, so they're not on horseback here. And it took them 3 hours, or they waited, to go from Villas Bretonneux to this village. And the fields that you're looking at now are where they all came across. So all of the men of the bays came across these fields. And we're now going to go into various villages. They spread out from here. So this is the first village, and it's called, if you can see the sign down there, Bayonville. And they stopped just north of here, part of them, and it sounds like there was a breakdown of communication. They didn't get the orders quick enough to come here, and when they did, there was heavy firing over on the east of the village. So on my right hand side, as I'm looking, the enemy were well dug in, so I think they had to retreat back here. And where Jeff's pointing the camera now, many of the men went across these fields around the enemy in Bayonville. So the pockets of them in a few of the villages we're going to go through now, but this is the first bit where they would have all congregated, and then they're probably running across these fields. So we know this was the start of it. It's 7:40 and the fighting has started. What we're going to do now is, we don't know which bit of this William's in. We know he's here, we know he's come off the main road there, but we don't know which bit. So we're going to give you the 2 or 3 villages of what happened there, and somewhere in that is William's story. But unfortunately, we don't get it in the war diary. It doesn't. Sorry, in his service record, it doesn't give that level of detail, which would have really pinned to where he was. But I think it's good enough to say we know he's somewhere around this fighting, and it's not a very big area anyway. So we're going to jump to the next village, which was coming round to the east of Bayonville, where again there was more resistance that they found. So we've now just moved to south of a village just behind me called Harbonnier. We've come from Bayonville, which was the first village that the Queen's Bays attacked. There were just not many men that stayed there, and they hit, as I said earlier, they hit heavy firing. Where we are now, it's really hard to describe this bit. The vast majority of the bays are where we are now, across the fields on both sides, and there's fighting all around. It seems really chaotic because the village is German held. South of the railway line, just if you can see the tree line coming into play, and you can see there's a crossing. So south of there, just the other side where we're looking now, were Germans. So the Germans are now in front of us and behind us. The bays are in between them. And what follows, you can see why there are so many, men killed here, but also Germans killed. There's obviously fierce fighting on this day of days, the 8th of August, the start of the 100 days. But we're a little bit confused. I said about marching through, and we thought they must have been on foot, they were dismounted. But when you look at the war diary, on occasions they say marching, on occasions they talk about galloping. So I can only guess there's a combination here of mounted bays, but also they were down as the infantry. And if I just, as Jeff pans round, if I just give all the things that are happening in this vicinity, just south of the village, it talks about they were fired on here. So 2 troops charged the Germans, killing 20, capturing 26, and 2 machine guns, 2 trench mortars and 30 prisoners had all been taken, again all in this area. At 9:30 in the morning received heavy gunfire from south of Harbonnier, where we're looking at southeast, which is to the right. Massive shelling and firing, machine gun firing. They retired behind where we are towards the railway line. Just talking about Lieutenant Solani captured a wagon, 8 horses, took 9 prisoners and killed 10. I think it's giving you a real scale of the hand-to-hand fighting going on here. The railway line at this stage was held, but the enemy were fighting from behind it, so they really have got them on all sides. And then at 9:45 in the morning, a squadron galloped over the crest, looking back towards the village, we're trying to work out where the crest was. Jeff, you think it's kind of where?
I think it's probably here.
Do you think so?
Yeah. Because the road certainly dips down.
And remarkably, I mean, I still think it's pretty exposed here. I know you're saying there are places they could have, and I can see they've taken shelter, but the vast majority of the men would have been, you know, exposed to the firing. There is one remarkable note in the war diary that says, coming down where we are now, a lorry coming out of Harbonnier was captured. It was full of officers' kit, but the men escaped. The Germans escaped. And at 10:30 here, they met up with the Australians. We referred to Villers-Bretonneux being very significant for the Australians. Well, here the Bays met the Australians. William will have been very much around the Australian troops at this part of his war. This is August 18 as a reminder again. So I think that's given the perspective of coming off that main road from Mannion. They came down south. Some of them stayed at Bavia. The vast majority come into these fields. All these fields have been all around it, and it, you know, must have been really, really scary heading from this village here and knowing the fired on behind. And I'm just trying to capture some of the stats of how many Germans and how many prisoners were involved. So big part of that day. We're just now going to go to, there was the biggest part of the brigade was here and the fighting was here, but just north of Harbonnier, some have got round here. They're obviously finding the villages have got German strong, have gone round them, hence we're in the fields here around these little villages. So there's one more we're just going to go to now, which is the final piece of the fighting on this day. We just got another, I can't believe I forgot this bit, we're still looking at Harbonnier there in the distance, so we're just leaving from where we filmed before. But one of the things around here, around the fighting here, was there was tank involvement. The Bays had the tanks supporting them, and it was a new form of tank called a whippet, which I kind of know reasonably well, because when we did my grandfather's First World War story, there was a day in April 1918 where he was training with these new whippet tanks. They were much quicker, much more versatile, not quite the same firepower, but they found them much more suitable to. So where we're driving now, we think this is probably the line that the tanks were coming in. So I like the fact that it links my grandfather in a sort of way to William, but this would have been where they'd have been heading. So again, you can picture the scene of the Bays, horses, dismounted men, the tanks, Germans either side. Gosh, this was real hand-to-hand stuff.
See, this is where I think they will have taken some cover, Chris, on this embankment on the right-hand side.
Oh yeah, I can see what you're saying now.
See, so it's quite sheltered there from the church, isn't
You're right, you're right. You're always right.
Because I think this would have been here like this at the time.
Is this what you were saying they call a sunken road?
Well, probably part of it, but you can see down here you're sheltered from the church, whereas obviously as soon as you stick your head above the top.
Yeah, yeah.
So we've just entered the village of Harbonnier and we just have a look at the church. I don't know if you can actually see this picking it up, but a number of places within the church have all got shell holes in them. So I'm assuming that must have been right from the time there. Looks like it's taken quite a battering.
So we just now arrived at a village called Guillarcourt, and this is at 3:30 p.m. after all the fighting at the villages that we've just referred to. They retired here. They hit and withdrew because they lost men and took many Germans as well, and got the order at 3:30 p.m. to retire. It's not a retreat, it's a retire. Ready to go again the next day. So we're just driving through all of the Queen's Bays, the whole of the regiment stayed here for the night of the 8th.
So this is still the same railway line, isn't it? We're just coming up to.
like the one that we crossed earlier at Villers Bretonite.
Yeah.
After 200 meters, turn right, D136.
Do you think they had a sat nav?
I think they made a better job of it than us.
Well, yeah, that's true.
Turn right.
Turn right. You missed that, have you?
Well, I'm just going through the coming out the village. We'll see. So this would have obviously been a place of safety and security on that night. Although it's not very far away from the fighting, is it, Jeff?
It don't look to be.
As we're saying, as we come out in the fields to our right here, is where the fighting's still going on over there. Okay, so that was kind of how we ended this momentous day of the 8th of August 1918. We're now at War Villas Churchyard Extension, Commonwealth War Graves Cemetery, and on the 9th of August, the first day of the 100 Days Offensive, we've just talked through the fighting that William and the Bays were at south of Harbonnier. One of the Queen's Bays that was killed there was a chap called John McCall, and he's buried here. So as we're passing through and heading for the next village in William's story, we wanted to remember John. So Jeff's gonna find his grave now.
So about 98% of the graves here are all Canadian. They must have fought alongside each other.
And here's John McCall, died on the 9th of August 1918, the first day, let's say, of the 100 days. 27 years old, son of Peter and Annie. God bless you, John. And I'm just going to leave another poppy for one of William's friends. They went with songs to the battle. They were young, straight of limb, true of eye, steady and aglow. They were staunch to the end, against odds uncounted. They fell with their faces to the foe. They shall grow not old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
So we're going to find George Lockley's grave first. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, just for those of you who don't know these cemeteries, haven't been here, because this is a really large cemetery, they have what they call the Stone of Remembrance. I think it's 1,000 graves before you get something like this. And it's got quite a history. When they decided they want to do this, they didn't know what words to put on it. So they asked Rudyard Kipling nonetheless, you know, what a relationship he had with the war. He lost his son in the First World War, his only son. So it seemed such a pick. And he came up with these infamous words that you find on all these cemeteries now. Then, their name liveth forevermore. And so I've got a nice link to that story, that his son was in the Irish Guards, which Fran will know, was my dad was in the Irish Guards. But yeah, if there are 1,000 graves in any of these cemeteries, you get one of these wonderful stones of remembrance. And for 100, you get a cross of sacrifice. I think Jeff will probably point the cross of sacrifice one that you can see in the far corner. And again, as we said yesterday, they keep out of the shadow. They prevent the shadow from covering any of the graves. We're looking at 1917 when they lost their lives. G. Lockley, you can see there, Queen's Base, 22nd of November 1917. Just move now to DL Richards. They're very close to each other, the two base soldiers. 20th of November is the start of the Battle of Cambrai, well known in history because it was pretty much the first major tank battle. It was a remarkable feat. It ended up, not particularly, the first few days were a real success, but it didn't end up that way. But 20th of November, on the first day of the battle, William and the Queen's Bays are here, and we'll show you exactly where here was in a minute, but just whilst we're standing on this good vantage point, I'm hoping you can see in the distance the cemetery. We went to see the two Queen's Bays buried, who died in the fighting over these 2 days. I think you can just see at the top of that hill where they're buried. So they're actually buried pretty much where they started, they formed before the battle. So just swinging round now to the fields, these open fields here, at 6:20 in the morning of the 20th of November, William was here in a huge concentration area, 1st Cavalry Division with the tanks. So it was infantry. We're pretty sure, it's often hard to tell, but we think he's infantry here. We don't think what's to follow is a mounted battle. I think they're dismounted, they're an infantry. But it all starts here 6:20 in the morning. So it's a very short clip here just to get what would have been a very quiet area here, other than the noise of the tanks, I'm guessing. So we're now going to we're heading up northeast towards Cambrai. Cantaing is the name of the place that the Bays were told to get, supporting the tanks. And it's a little bit of a story like the one we did at Farnpoo. Very similar result to it all. So we're going to film a couple of places en route to that, and then we've got fantastic detail of the last mile of where William was around there. So really great to be able to share that. So we'll head up there. So at 6:20 in the morning, we saw where William and the cavalry and the tanks were starting their route up to Cantaing, which is the bit we're going to do on the live zoom for you. So we're only a couple of miles, if that, from where we just filmed to a place called Fin, F-I-N-S, and right on the corner here, so the fields that we're looking at would have been quite a spectacle. The Queen's Bays, the entire 1st Cavalry Division, which would have been an enormous amount of men and horses, were ready down here, prepared for what's to come. So what a sight. I suspect you wouldn't have seen much field. So this is very much now the road up to Cantaing. So the cavalry are down here, William's down here, and we're now going to drive through to a couple of places en route on this infamous day, and we'll film live for the last couple of miles where we've got say fantastic detail to share with you. We're on the Battle of Cambrai. It's November the 20th, the first day of that battle. We've shown you those few places and we've done a few videos on route. One thing we noticed coming up here was just how up and down the land was. So you get a great panoramic view, and then you're underneath, you see nothing at all. And William would have had that. And obviously he'd have known he's heading for a significant battle. The story is all about the tanks, Cambrai, and it's really a massive part of William's history that he was part of the first ever major tank battle, and the cavalry did support them. So it's an unbelievable story. And the bit what we're going to give you now is where the Queen's Bays went with the tanks to this place called Cantaing. If we get this wrong, it's because we haven't got it on the sat nav yet. We could find the wrong place, but we know the journey in there. We wanted you to feel that in the car. You'll get to see everything around. But just to show you the level of detail where we know there's a crossroads here. It's hardly worth calling it that. There's a track we're on, and there's a road the other side. You can perhaps just see the car peeping out from that. This crossroads was a place called Premy Chapel. And the way I find this level of detail when we tell these stories, where I say we're standing in the field, the way you can do it most significantly is through some great stuff that's out there. The National Library of Scotland has every First World War trench map. This is I hope it comes up, but don't worry if you can't see. But this is the trench map from October 1917. So it's a month before. Can you see my right
Yeah.
It says Premy Chapel. You don't need to read that, but the Premy Chapel was that whole area. There wasn't much there. Doesn't exist. It was clearly whatever happened around this time.
It's on this crossroads.
Yes, but there was a chapel. And there were buildings at the back here. When you look at the map, they've got. There's nothing, and this was a proper road. You know, people, it doesn't look like there's anything here at all. So we do know that this is the spot where, in the history of the bays, and the tanks were here first, and they were heading where Jeff's now pointing for this place called Canteng. So we've done all those places en route to get here. We're going to stay with you now for William's journey to Canteng, but he would have known when he's on the ground we are now that he's supporting the tanks. He's supporting, and there's a combination of the bays on foot and on horse. There are two things going on here. So we just wanted to stop here to give you that. We're now going to go back to, we'll just keep recording all of this, and I'll tell you the story when we get into Canteng. It was the southwest of the village, so as soon as we arrive at Canteng, we'll park up, because we know that's where, you know, all that happened did happen. And it's obvious now we're at, you know, the stage of the war here where, you know, because all sorts of things are changing. This is November 1917. And I think the tank had become such a big player. It was the Battle of Cambrai at the end, nobody really won. We made great inroads for 5 or 6 days, and then it all came back again. Classic World War One. But there were so many lessons learned. So it was pivotal in what we followed to the end. So right, you're gonna have to walk and keep this dead steady. So we'll do that journey now.
I think that might look like you were wearing a water tower as a hat, Chris.
You did that deliberately. Right, okay, folks. So are you back with us?
Yes, thanks.
Okay. So we're just trying to run somebody over. Okay, so we gave you the introduction there as to this is the crossroads I made reference to. So the tanks went at 11 o'clock in the morning. We're now on the 21st of November, day 2 of the Battle of Cambrai, but the first day proper for William. So this road we're now on is the
starting route to Canting, Sir Escort. In 1 mile, turn right onto Rue de l'Église.
Well, you're getting sat-nav talking to you now as well. But this is the route that they'll have taken. So the tanks went first around 11 o'clock in the morning, and William and the bays were told to come behind them. So the tanks were going in very, very much first. I think we're about 3 miles, do we think?
No, it's less than that, about a mile now.
Okay, but all that you're seeing now, we really wanted to share this. Will have been William's, you know, this is a day where he's right in the thick of it. Say, at a particularly historical battle. So you'll see, and it's hard to see sometimes where you're heading for. We were trying to see if you could see Canteng in the distance, and we don't think you could. I don't think those windmills were there when he was here.
Mm.
Again, you can see how very often they get hidden from view and then they're out in the open. There are many times in a journey we've done from the cemetery we're at this morning where you are so out in the open, you know, as a feature of the French countryside. But here, again, you see we're in a dip, so they would be totally invisible, not that far where the German stronghold would be, but they wouldn't see anything here. They'd feel very safe at this stage.
Turn right onto Rue de l'Église.
We've established they wouldn't spot a sat nav as well, haven't we? Yeah, Canteng, right. Okay, so we're now heading.
In 1 mile, arrive at Canting, Sir Escort.
How skilled do you think I am? Messing about.
I'm so impressed with Jeff.
Two phones.
He's filming this and doing sat nav with another phone. You're a star. Okay, so you can see here. Is that Canteng? It's too big. That looks like. So we are approaching now. It feels to me, I'm going to slow down here. Don't know what you guys feel, but it feels very in the open here. I'm not sure even having the tanks around me, I feel particularly safe here, but yeah, they're very open here.
Chris,
Yeah.
did the Germans and the British develop tanks about the same time as each other?
I think we were slightly ahead of the game, and they were certainly the first game. The Germans were really desperate to capture some of our tanks that got stuck in the muck and the quagmire. They were really keen to learn our technology. Right. So I think we were there slightly first, but it didn't take long. Okay, so here we're at this point here. I don't know whether I can pull up somewhere. You can see we're just entering Cantang, and we've come. This is William would have come in at this point. This is the end of the village they did. I think it's a long, thin village that they had. But I'll just pull up here. Oh, we've got some horses. Now there you go. They did that just for William. That's appropriate. But just looking at the war diary, I'll drive through here. But at this point in the war diary, if I just summarise, they were, once they got here, they cleared 100 prisoners remarkably, and it feels to us when we read the war diary earlier, Jeff and I, it feels to us as if the Germans were very keen to give up here. This is a massive number, and I guess some of that is answering your question there about the tanks and where the Germans were with it. I think the tanks would have terrified them, the sight of that, and then you've got cavalry charging through behind. Oh, it just feels like an awe-inspiring sight. So they took 100 straight off, and then it said on the left, so the left of where we're looking, same sort of area, forced a pocket of 300 of the enemy. So we're now to retire. There's 400 prisoners they've got within the first half an hour, and they were told they stayed. We'll drive through the village now, but William and the Bays were told to hold this village all day, which they did until 7 o'clock at night. And then on that night, 160 civilians who were still here were evacuated. And interesting, Mike, on your, again, I'm thinking of the Scots story that I think there were Scots that went through horrors. Was at Farm Poo yesterday that we saw, but the Scots replaced the Bays here the day after. So for all the Battle of Cambrai lasted so long, the Bays are only here pretty much one day. They fought here, took all those prisoners, and then retired at that night. I'm just holding fire because there's a car just coming. I'll let it pass me.
Chris, why would that be? Why would the High Command withdraw somebody after there's only been a battle one day?
It's really strange. I've never done a cavalry story before, so this one's been really interesting for me. Normally, they keep them about 5 days, and they don't want to keep them there long because it's obviously so horrific. So they've always got people in reserve ready to come and replace you. But that's more the trench fighting, where they can manage that much easier. Lots of communication lines, you can bring people in and out. So I've not experienced this with cavalry. I'm guessing they're almost specialised. They're a dismounted cavalry. They can move them anywhere quickly, and I think they want them at hand.
Right.
And I think I sent the map earlier, didn't I, before we came away, of where William's War was, scattergram all over the place. So lots going through the diary. What you see is they move the horses to somewhere. The Bays have often then been fighting as infantry back to the horses, and they move them then to the next hot spot. Seeing them go up to the Third Battle of Ypres, they can get them there so quickly. I think there was also a belief that the cavalry, would make great pace through. If they did break the line, the cavalry would make fantastic ground, and that just never happened. There's nowhere in William's story do we see them, galloping through the lines, and they're basically, they're just clearing the village out or dismounting and fighting, as I say. So, but here does seem to be. I mean, obviously they've had some. We saw those two graves. The two chaps we just saw first thing this morning, they died here. They died at Kanteng. So it was sad to see them, but it's nice actually to be able to remember them and also remember exactly where they were. I'll drive into the village now. I don't know how big this is. Didn't look very big on the map. And as I say, the whole of the Queen's Bay's regiment were here on this night, on this day, I should say, of the 21st of November. And much of that day for them, it sounds like they were managing prisoners and the evacuation of all the civilians. So what an image for William, you know, coming through, you know, seeing all the tanks, because what an awesome sight. And then, you know, that scale of that victory, it must have felt like. I say, sadly, Cambrai wasn't a victory at the end. The Germans recovered it all. What I don't know is Kanteng. I should check when I get home. In 2 weeks from, you know, after the 21st of November, I wonder whether the Germans got it back again. They certainly would have had it spring offensive, March 1918. So much of these grounds were just taken back by the Germans. Must have been horrible seeing that. Do we think, Jeff, there's any evidence of old property here?
It's difficult to tell, isn't it? What's 100 years old or what's not.
The hard thing is the buildings that would have been hit hard, you know, if they're damaged, they did just rebuild them, so they still look like the old building. It's kind of a long and thin village. Yeah, it's a long and thin village. What you're seeing is pretty much it. Yeah, there's the local church. Once again, they've not gone creative in design. They all look the same.
Yeah, but it looks quite modern mortar, doesn't it?
That one does.
It looks very new.
Let me take a look at that one again. Yeah, it does. That's not. I think that's not been there.
Brick, not stone.
That's right. I agree. Yeah, yeah.
That's what they're just saying. It's not 100 years
No.
old.
That's a bit longer than I thought, actually. And just imagine the site. This would have been filled with horses.
This barn here will have been
on the left here. Yeah. Oh, yeah. There you go. And the shell holes all over the place here.
Oh.
Yeah. We're seeing shell holes on this barn. If you get my nose, that's not my fault.
It's for sale. You can buy it if you want.
Okay. Gosh, yeah. So, right, there is evidence here of the fighting. Guessing this is the end of it.
It won't be the first time it's been longer than I guess.
Yeah.
Finally, it goes on for 20 miles.
It's a bit longer than I thought. Yeah, I was just picturing the scene here that on that day for William, and just the whole place would have been full of the First Cavalry Division.
Wonder if they just stayed in the fields though, rather than coming through the town.
No, it's actually said they stayed in the centre of the village. The war diary particularly said that.
Do you think it was better to be a cavalryman than an infantryman?
Say that again.
Do you think it was better to be a cavalryman than an infantryman?
I do actually, having done this story, I definitely do, Mike. I think, you know, as much as he was in, God, he hit so many. If you think of, you know, the battles that he was involved in, and he would have seen some horrific things, and he was involved because he was infantry on occasions, so he has had nightmares. But yes, I think you're less likely. Think of that third battle of Ypres, Jeff's great uncle, buried in the quagmire of that day. Well, the cavalry were there ready, couldn't be used because the weather's not suitable for horses. You know, I think there's little doubt that you were better being off there. None of it's good. But are we gonna? You want to stop? Oh, yeah. Right. Okay. We're going to finish. This seems appropriate. Jeff's just noticed there's a Commonwealth War Grave Cemetery there. We're just going to pop over to it.
29th September 1918.
Yeah. So it's interesting, yeah, most of these, Jeff just said, they look to be September and October 1918.
Gosh, they nearly made it, didn't they?
Yeah. So this cemetery was 2 months before William was here. So presumably the Germans held out through whatever attack these men will have been, repulsed. And a month later, William's here, and the Germans, 400 of them, were taken as prisoner. I did wonder why we hadn't got the Queen's Bays that died in here.
They've got some Navy people here, Chris. I wonder whether or not it was sort of all hands to the pumps, for the sort of final push of it all.
I don't doubt that.
Royal Naval Volunteer Reserve, and
yeah. If you've got somebody, use them for whatever purpose.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's a pretty little place, isn't it?
It is. And if Jeff, you just sweep round the other side of the Cross of Sacrifice, seeing the open fields, we've seen a lot of this, haven't we? But
I can't see anything on the screen now because of the sun.
I know.
So,
You can see the dagger really well.
can you?
Can you? Good. They are beautiful, aren't they? The Cross of Sacrifice. There's something incredibly peaceful about them. They are so well kept.
And
Right.
they're all the same as well, aren't they? They're all the same.
They're absolutely identical. You're right, Fran. Right. Well, I think I'm hoping. I thought it was a great thing to do that rather than just get here and tell you what happened here.
Yeah.
I think you're having that journey to know that the tanks and the horses came through that route we just took. It was a brilliant thing to keep. And obviously, I'll make sure the films go on YouTube eventually. But that's it. We've still got. It's not the end for us. It's the last of the live Zooms. But we've got 2 things to do. One of them, I think, there's a couple of places on Spring Offensive. I don't remember the other one. But what we're finding is it does show what the war was like. That the places are quite close where he was fighting in 1916 around the Somme area. They're back in the same sort of places 2 years later. It was the nature of it. So we rather than do one battle and then we'd have been there, back, been putting a lot more mileage on. So we've got a couple of things to finish. We'll do the usual, we'll do a video and put it out for you. But as it's the last Zoom, could we just say Jeff and I have loved doing this.
Yeah, it's been great. It really has. Very personal story, isn't it? So It's always great to do that.
We feel we know William, and we certainly, I think when you do this, hopefully it's come over with what you've been watching as well. It's the closest you get to experiencing how it must be. It takes it beyond knowing that he was just in the war. But even this last bit we've done, that feeling of how the land lay and how the emotions must have been, the difference in some of the First World War poets particularly comment about the safety and the serenity of the countryside when they're down below, and then the horror of suddenly being exposed. And you get a feel of that when you're driving around. But we've only done part of William's story. We could have spent a month here because he was involved in so much. He was here for all those years. But I think we've done the major battles that we're involved in and the flavour of those. So I think we've done the sort of places you most want to be done. But thanks from Jeff himself for being part of this, because I think you being on the Zoom, as I was just saying earlier to Jane, I think it just feel like you've been here with us in a funny way.
Yeah,
Yes,
very much.
it does, yeah.
And
That-
This has been a mammoth organisational effort, and for you to have taken us along with you has been a great privilege for us. So this is ours, and thank you very much for what you've done.
Thank you.
You are most welcome, and that was the reason of doing this. I wanted you to have this story and get the vision, everything with it. So I'm so pleased that you felt that. I kind of feel I don't know how to end this. If I had a trumpet, I'd play last. Jeff has said he would do the last post through his nose. I've said
Why don't we do a tribute to all those lives that have been lost?
I like the sound of that, Fran.
Yeah.
How do you suggest?
I'll do Last Thoughts Unknown because it's probably relevant to all soldiers that have fallen and to all families because, like Paul said, like Dad said, they never spoke about it, so we never knew their last thoughts on this experience at all, did we?
Fran, I think that's a lovely idea. I'll need to get my hanky out.
Oh, very emotional.
Fran, I think I just said, and I didn't know how to end that, but you've just taken the biscuit. That's an absolutely beautiful way to finish it. Thank you so much for that. And I think we can definitely say we've really honoured William's memory and his mates, that some of them who didn't come home. So I think that's been a great way to finish this. So thanks everyone. Hope, and I say again, hope you sort of enjoyed it all. And I will pull this together. I'll take out the rubbish bits, which is about 90% of Jeff and I. But what will be left, and I'll link it to the story. We've got that YouTube anyway. I think I can end up with something that will be a wonderful visual record.
I think Dad would like to say a couple of words.
I just want to thank you, Chris. And absolutely brilliant. Yes, we really appreciate all the work you've done. And yes, thanks once again.
Oh, thank you. That means so much. Makes it worth doing to hear that.
Yeah, you've done them all proud, Chris and Jeff. Thank you.
Oh,
William.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
It's been good.
Thanks for being so keen.
Just a little.
Just reiterate that from here as well, Chris. It's been absolutely superb and very, very moving and very poignant.
Oh, thank you so much. I feared you might be saying, not another video.
No, I think if I could just add a PS, what it makes you realise, seeing these row after row of graves, is that our Papa could have been under one of them.
Absolutely.
And if he had been, none of us would be here.
I know.
No.
Yeah, absolutely right.
I was thinking that this morning, Paul. I was thinking, look at our massive family, you know, Dad with all his brothers and sisters, and then all of us cousins. And then you look at those graves and you think of all those families like ours that just didn't exist because
That's right.
Because of all those young men that sort of died, and how fortunate we are really, and how, you know, it comes back to what, you know, a Mannion family motto anyway, isn't it? Sort of, you know, faith, family and friends, isn't it? And what Chris has done has encompassed all of that, hasn't it, all together? You know, his just love for mankind and for history has brought all this together for our family, so sort of special. So I think words can't really express sort of our appreciation and depth of feeling really for that. So thank you so much, Chris and Jeff, from the bottom of our hearts.
Well said, Jane.
Yeah, and you said words couldn't express it, but you've just expressed it beautifully. So I do appreciate that.
It's not me.
Oh no, everything you've said then you've added to the occasion.
One last thing before you do go. I think everyone wants to see the cameraman.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah, before my arms drop off.
he's camera shy.
There he is.
Just what I can't see.
Hi, everybody.
Right, now hang on, because we've changed roles, I'll get the picture perfect and you have to say something interesting.
Something interesting.
Oh, thank you, Jeff. There you go.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Well done, Jeff.
Okay, cheers.
Right, and we're finishing with Jeff. That's a perfect way to finish, I think, with the cameraman.
Yes, we're off to the bar soon.
Yeah.
5 hours.
Yeah.
I think we're 5 hours away from that.
No, better not be.
Jeff, give us a salute before you go.
Oh, God bless you all anyway. Thank you so much for sharing this.
Good afternoon.
Okay, bye.
Cheers.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
See you all soon.
Bye-bye.
You're all called to the bar.
So, right at the last part of our 3 days following William's story, and we're back to the Spring Offensive. It's the 21st of March 1918, so it's the first day of the German offensive, and for the weeks that followed they made incredible ground. So many places that we'd gained over the period of the war just went in no time at all. It must have been horrifying. So I think, a bit like we spoke about the Somme, just fantastic to find out where William was on such a critical day. The first day, March the 21st, 1918, the first day of the Spring Offensive, was an equally significant point in time, and William was at this place called Bern, and the Queen's Bays on the 21st itself, so that first day, were camped in the fields around here in readiness. They arrived here at 1 p.m. that afternoon. And they stayed here through the night, so we're kind of in readiness. They would have known. They would have known, something was happening, and overnight, and then into the following morning, they headed just east of here to join in there. We'll tell that bit of the story. That's the last place we're going to go to. But the first day of the Spring Offensive itself was based here and slept overnight. We've just come from Bern, 21st of March 1918, first day of the German Spring Offensive. We're now overnight, 21st into the 22nd, and we're about just over 3 miles east of Bern at this place here called Vendelis, and the Queen's Bays were here, and the fighting had become, this was the start of the major fighting around that time, and the Germans were in massive force, and this whole area where the bays were was being shelled really, really heavily. So I think Jeff's just going to turn around and give the landscape of where the bays would have been. And during the day of the 22nd, they realised that they were in such a volatile area. They moved the horses out. Interestingly, the horses first, so they were led away, and the men stayed here till the end of the day. But by the end of the day, they moved back to Bern. They had realised, and they were, I think I'd say on the YouTube film, I say something about they were in the worst possible place. When you look at the map of the Spring Offensive and where the Germans were and what they took, the Queen's Bays are right in the middle of it. They are in the worst possible place. I guess the fortunate thing for them is, because they're mounted, they can get away, the next day they can get some distance quite quickly. There'll be a lot of the infantry that were here and couldn't move, didn't have quite the same fortune. So this is the last place we're going to visit in this story. Yeah, thank you, Jeff. Yeah, that was from me too. And we're finishing like most. I think William's War, there is one feature, and it's basically standing in a field, because I think he did a lot of being in fields. But it's been brilliant to be here and to, as we said earlier, to witness or feel, we could witness, the events he was involved in. And as I think I said on the YouTube film, he created history. He was part of some of the most significant things that happened during the First World War, and we've been able to visit them over these last few days, so it's just been fantastic. So this is the official signing off from Jeff and myself thanks everyone for listening, and I hope you've enjoyed it all.
Off to find some beer now. Bye everyone.